Tonight, I will tell you a story, one of courage, deception, and a battle against an empire built on black gold. It begins in the city of Lagos, where the scent of saltwater mixes with diesel fumes, and where power brokers whisper deals in dimly lit boardrooms. In the heart of it all was Jide Okaforum, a man once loyal to the cartel, now its greatest enemy. He had once been one of them, trusted, respected, but that changed the day he discovered the truth. Jide had spent years working under the shadow of the cartel, believing he was helping stabilize the economy. But the documents he found, hidden within encrypted files, told a different story. It was not about stabilizing the market, it was about domination. The cartel was manipulating prices, sabotaging local refineries, and ensuring that the nation remained dependent on their imports. He knew that if he spoke, he would be hunted. But silence was never an option. The oil cartel was not a single entity, but a web of interests spanning from local politicians to international financiers. At the head of it was the enigmatic chief Bode Aladamir, a businessman with deep ties to foreign oil companies. He had built his empire not just through legal contracts, but through backdoor deals, bribes, and sometimes, ruthless eliminations. Bode Aladamir did not act alone. His most trusted enforcer was Hassan Omakaromo, a former military commander with experience in counterinsurgency operations. Hassan ensured that threats to the cartel were silenced before they became problems. Beneath him was an intricate network of assassins, spies, and corporate informants who monitored every potential whistleblower. Jide's discovery of the files was not an accident. A former cartel accountant, Samuel Ogundape, had smuggled the documents out after a falling out with Hassan. Samuel had been on the run for months, hiding in safe houses, knowing that once the cartel found him, he would be executed. He reached out to Jide through an anonymous source, setting up the first real challenge to the cartel's dominion in decades. The night after Jide met Samuel, he knew he had been marked. A black Mercedes with tinted windows followed him from his office. He switched lanes, made unnecessary turns, and drove into a crowded market, abandoning his car to disappear into the crowd. From a vantage point, he saw two men step out of the Mercedes, scanning the area. They were searching for him. Jide met with an old friend, Amina Danjuma, a fearless investigative journalist. Amina had spent the past decade exposing corruption in high places, but she had never faced an adversary as powerful as the oil cartel. When he showed her the files, her face turned pale. She told him this was bigger than they imagined. It was a conspiracy that reached deep into government offices, international oil firms, and even the highest levels of law enforcement. She warned him that exposing this would put a target on his back. He told her he was ready. But the cartel moved faster than he expected. That night, as he left Amina's apartment, he noticed the black SUV trailing him. He kept his pace steady, turned at the next junction, and ducked into an alley. A moment later, two men stepped out of the SUV, scanning the street. Their movements were smooth, professional. These were not ordinary street thugs. They were the cartel's enforcers. Jide's heart pounded as he pressed himself against the wall. He knew this was just the beginning. He had to act fast. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed a secure number. On the other end was Ibrahim Kasima, a former military intelligence officer turned security consultant. Ibrahim owed Jide a favor, one that could mean the difference between life and death. He took no chances. That night, he packed a small bag and moved into a secure location arranged by Ibrahim Kasima. Ibrahim, being a former intelligence officer, understood the cartel's tactics. "They won't stop coming," he told Jide. "We need to take the fight to them." The next day, he and Amina arranged a meeting with Senator Bakomo, a politician who had once spoken against oil corruption. The senator listened, nodding gravely as he flipped through the files. He told them he had suspected foul play for years but never had proof. He promised to take it to the highest level. But Jide had seen enough to know that promises meant nothing in this world. He needed action. And he was right to be cautious. 3 days later, the senator was dead, his car found at the bottom of the lagoon, his death ruled an accident. Jide and Amina knew better. They knew the cartel had sent a message: stay silent or perish. Meanwhile, Amina Danjuma was working tirelessly to trace the cartel's financial records. She had infiltrated a high-level oil summit in Abuja, where Bode Aladamir was expected to make a major announcement. Disguised as a delegate, she mingled with corporate executives and overheard a critical conversation, one that confirmed the cartel's connection to European offshore accounts used to launder billions in stolen oil revenue. She relayed the information to Jide, who realized they had to act fast. If they could expose the financial transactions, international regulators would be forced to step in. But just as they made progress, tragedy struck. Samuel, the accountant who had smuggled the files, was found dead in a hotel room in Port Harcourt. His throat had been slit, and the laptop containing evidence was missing. The cartel had acted quickly, and the message was clear: anyone who betrayed them would pay the ultimate price. Jide and Amina knew they were running out of time. With Samuel dead, they needed a new way to access the cartel's financial transactions. That's when Ibrahim proposed something radical: hacking into the offshore accounts through a government insider. Ibrahim had a contact within the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU, a young but brilliant analyst named Tunde Bakare. Tunde had access to encrypted banking systems that held records of major oil transactions. If they could extract that data, they could prove the cartel's corruption beyond doubt. The operation was set in motion. Amina would distract the cartel's surveillance by publishing a false lead, while Ibrahim and Jide worked with Tunde to access the accounts. But hacking into such a system was dangerous. If detected, it could trigger an immediate response from both the cartel and corrupt officials inside the government. At exactly midnight, Ibrahim and Jide met Tunde in a secure location. Using sophisticated encryption tools, they gained access to a Swiss banking system where millions of dollars were funneled monthly. Just as they were about to finalize the extraction, an alarm triggered within the system. Someone had betrayed them. Within minutes, an armed strike team stormed the building. Bullets tore through walls as Jide, Ibrahim, and Tunde fought their way out. Amina, monitoring from a remote location, saw everything unfold through a hacked security feed. She realized that someone on the inside had tipped off the cartel. As they escaped into the night, Tunde was wounded. Jide and Ibrahim barely managed to get him to safety. The cartel had almost won. As Jide and Amina pushed forward with their investigation, it became clear that someone within the government was feeding information to the cartel. Each time they made progress, their movements were anticipated. Jide suspected someone in the National Security Council, but without proof, he could do nothing. Amina uncovered an encrypted message exchanged between a top government official and a known cartel informant. The official in question was none other than Minister Garba Adekina, a man who had long projected an image of reform and anti-corruption. But the messages revealed otherwise. Garba had been receiving bribes in exchange for silencing internal investigations and warning the cartel of impending raids. Knowing this was a game-changer, Jide and Amina had to act carefully. If they moved too soon, Garba would destroy any remaining evidence. If they waited too long, they risked being exposed themselves. What Jide didn't know was that the cartel's power extended far beyond Nigerian borders. Foreign intelligence agencies, particularly a rogue faction within a European energy conglomerate, had been quietly backing the cartel. Their goal was simple: ensure Nigeria's oil sector remained unstable so they could profit from fluctuating markets. Ibrahim, using his old intelligence connections, discovered a secret meeting set to take place in Geneva between cartel representatives and foreign investors. It was a deal that would see billions of dollars in laundered money funneled into offshore accounts in exchange for keeping oil supply artificially low. Jide knew this was their chance to not only expose the cartel but also dismantle its foreign alliances. However, the cartel was already aware of his movements, and Hassan Omakaromo had dispatched a kill team to ensure Jide never made it out of Lagos. As Jide and his team prepared to leave for Geneva, they were ambushed. Armed men stormed their hideout in Victoria Island, guns blazing. Amina and Ibrahim barely had time to react as bullets tore through windows and walls. Jide, grabbing a pistol from his bag, led them through a back exit into the bustling streets. The cartel's enforcers pursued them relentlessly, shooting indiscriminately into the crowd. Jide and Ibrahim fought back, using the chaos of the marketplace to their advantage. It was a brutal firefight, but eventually, they managed to escape, though wounded and shaken. After barely escaping Lagos, Jide and Amina arrived in Geneva, where they met with a whistleblower from the European energy conglomerate. The informant, a Swiss banker named Klaus Reinhardt, provided detailed records of offshore transactions linked to the cartel. Amina had a final card to play. She released a damning exposé that linked Bode Aladamir and Hassan Omakaromo to the illegal transactions. International media houses picked up the story. With these documents in hand, they coordinated with international regulators to freeze the cartel's assets. Within hours, billions of dollars were locked down, cutting off the cartel's financial lifeline. The Nigerian government, now under immense pressure, had no choice but to take action. But Hassan Omakaromo wasn't done yet. Desperate and out of options, Hassan took matters into his own hands. He tracked Jide to a remote safe house outside Geneva, intent on finishing the job himself. In a final, brutal showdown, Jide and Hassan engaged in a vicious fight, with Hassan determined to silence him forever. But Jide had come too far to lose now. Using his intelligence training and sheer willpower, he overpowered Hassan, delivering a fatal blow that ended the cartel's most feared enforcer. With Hassan dead, Bode Aladamir had no more protection. International authorities arrested him as he tried to flee Dubai. Garba Adekina, exposed by Amina's reports, was forced to resign in disgrace. The cartel was dismantled piece by piece, its leaders either dead or in prison. The Nigerian government, pressured by the global scandal, began restructuring the oil sector. While corruption still lingered, a new sense of accountability took hold. Jide, Amina, and Ibrahim, though forever changed by their journey, knew they had achieved something monumental. With the cartel dismantled, the Nigerian government faced an unprecedented crisis. Protests erupted across major cities as citizens demanded full transparency in the oil sector. President Musa Garba, who had long turned a blind eye to corruption, found himself under immense pressure. International bodies, including the United Nations and the World Bank, demanded swift reforms or threatened to impose economic sanctions. The government initiated a special tribunal to investigate the full extent of cartel involvement within the administration. Several high-ranking officials, including former Minister Garba Adekina, were subpoenaed. The hearings were broadcast live, exposing the deep-rooted corruption that had plagued the oil sector for decades. The revelations shocked the nation, but the people were divided. Some saw Jide and his allies as heroes, while others believed they had merely scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy. While Bode Aladamir and Hassan Omakaromo were gone, the cartel was far from dead. A shadowy faction of loyalists, led by Aladamir's ruthless younger brother, Sian Aladamir, had vowed revenge. Operating under the name Black Dawn, This splinter group sought to regain control of the oil pipelines by force. Cian, a former military strategist, had amassed a small army of mercenaries and corrupt security officials. His plan was simple: retake key refineries and destabilize the country's oil supply, forcing the government to negotiate with him. His first act of defiance was an attack on a major oil depot in Warri, setting the facility ablaze and causing a nationwide fuel shortage. G-Day, now living under government protection, knew that his battle was far from over. If Black Dawn was not stopped, Nigeria would plunge into chaos. Amina, using her media influence, exposed the existence of the faction, but Cian was always a step ahead. He operated in the shadows, eliminating whistleblowers before they could speak. The fight had taken everything from them. G-Day was no longer the same man who had first uncovered the cartel's secrets. He was haunted by the deaths of allies who had sacrificed their lives for the cause. Every night, he replayed the moments of betrayal, the gunfights, the narrow escapes. Amina, too, had changed. Once a fearless journalist, she now lived with the knowledge that she could never return to a normal life. She had lost family members who had been targeted in retaliation. Her reports had exposed corruption, but at what cost? The burden of truth weighed heavily on her shoulders. Ibrahim, the former intelligence officer, found solace in his work, but the scars of battle ran deep. He had seen too many betrayals, too many comrades lost. He had always known that war left its mark, but he had never expected it to be this personal. The collapse of the cartels sent shockwaves through the global oil industry. Major energy corporations, who had secretly profited from Nigeria's corruption, scrambled to cover their tracks. The European conglomerate that had backed the cartel now faced multiple lawsuits and international investigations. But not everyone wanted Nigeria to recover. Foreign powers with vested interests saw the country's instability as an opportunity. Covert intelligence agencies began funding rebel factions, ensuring that chaos persisted. The fight was no longer just about oil, it was about control. In Washington, London, and Beijing, secret meetings were held to determine how best to influence Nigeria's future. Some wanted to install a puppet government that would restore the old order, while others sought to back reformists who would nationalize the oil industry, cutting out foreign influence altogether. G-Day knew that Cian Aladamir had to be stopped. With Ibrahim's help, they tracked Black Dawn to a hidden compound deep in the Niger Delta. What they found was a full-scale militia, armed with advanced weaponry and the backing of corrupt military officials. A plan was set in motion, an all-out assault led by a coalition of Nigerian special forces and international operatives. The battle was fierce. Explosions rocked the jungle as gunfire echoed through the night. Cian, defiant to the end, fought to the last breath. But in the end, he was outmatched. G-Day personally confronted him in the final moments, delivering the final blow that marked the end of Black Dawn. With Cian gone, the cartel's influence was shattered. Nigeria could finally begin the long process of rebuilding. The oil industry, once controlled by shadowy figures, was now placed under strict government oversight. It was a new era, but the scars of the past would never fully heal. G-Day, Amina, and Ibrahim parted ways, each carrying the weight of their journey. G-Day chose a quiet life, away from the limelight, though he would always be watching, ensuring that history did not repeat itself. Amina continued her fight through journalism, exposing corruption wherever it hid. Ibrahim returned to intelligence work, knowing that the battle for truth never truly ended. The war was over, but for G-Day, Amina, and Ibrahim, the ghosts of their past lingered. G-Day found himself waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, haunted by visions of those he had lost. The paranoia never truly left him. He constantly looked over his shoulder, expecting the cartel's remnants to strike at any moment. Amina, once the fearless journalist who had uncovered the biggest corruption scandal in Nigeria's history, now struggled with deep-seated guilt. She had exposed the truth, but at what cost? Friends and family had been targeted because of her investigations. She began questioning whether the pursuit of truth was truly worth the sacrifices made. Ibrahim, hardened by years of intelligence work, attempted to move on, but even he could not escape the trauma. Every gunshot, every betrayal, every close call weighed on him. He chose to immerse himself in new assignments, hoping that drowning in work would silence the memories. The fall of the cartel had sent shockwaves through Nigeria's political system. The special tribunal had exposed not only corrupt politicians but also deep-seated flaws in the country's governance. President Musa Garba, under pressure from both local activists and international organizations, launched the most ambitious political reform Nigeria had ever seen. The government enacted strict anti-corruption laws, overhauled the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC), and introduced a transparency initiative that allowed the public to track oil revenues in real time. Foreign investors, once hesitant to engage with Nigeria, slowly began returning, but with stricter regulatory oversight. Yet, not everyone welcomed these changes. The old power structures resisted, quietly working in the background to undermine the reforms. Several oil tycoons, once benefactors of the cartel's corruption, lobbied for policies that would allow him to regain control. Their efforts would soon prove dangerous. While the cartel had been dismantled, the void it left behind attracted new players. Smugglers, rogue militias, and foreign mercenaries saw an opportunity to capitalize on the chaos. A new syndicate, calling itself the Phoenix's Brotherhood, began rising from the ashes of the cartel's former empire. Led by a mysterious figure known only as General Kazim, the Phoenix's Brotherhood operated with brutal efficiency. Unlike the cartel, which relied on political influence, this new faction wielded pure military power. They attacked oil convoys, sabotaged government facilities, and kidnapped executives, demanding ransom in Bitcoin and offshore accounts. Jide, despite wanting to leave his past behind, was soon dragged back into the fight. The government needed someone with his knowledge and expertise, someone who had battled the cartel before. President Garba's office reached out with a proposition: lead a covert team to dismantle the Phoenix's Brotherhood before they became too powerful. Jide initially refused, but when reports surfaced that Amina had been targeted by Phoenix operatives for her past involvement in exposing the cartel, he knew he had no choice. The downfall of the cartel had far-reaching consequences beyond Nigeria. Countries that had relied on Nigeria's oil, often secured through backdoor deals, were now forced to negotiate legally. The global oil market fluctuated wildly as a result. The United States and the European Union hailed the reforms as a victory for transparency and governance. However, other nations, particularly those that had previously benefited from Nigeria's instability, were not pleased. Russia and China, both of whom had energy contracts with cartel-linked figures, saw Nigeria's new government as a threat to their geopolitical influence in Africa. Behind closed doors, international intelligence agencies began playing a dangerous game. While the West sought to support Nigeria's transition, other actors worked to destabilize it. The Phoenix's Brotherhood received silent backing from foreign interests that wanted the oil sector plunged back into disarray. Jide, now leading a covert counterterrorism unit, found himself in a new war, one not just against criminals, but against international powers that wanted Nigeria under their control. His team, a mix of military operatives, former cartel defectors, and government insiders, had to fight both on the ground and in the shadows. Meanwhile, Amina continued to document the struggle, revealing the hidden hands manipulating Nigeria's fate. She knew that her work made her a target, but she had long accepted that truth came at a price. Ibrahim, now working directly with the government's intelligence unit, uncovered evidence that the Phoenix's Brotherhood was planning a major attack on a newly built oil terminal. If successful, it would set Nigeria's economy back by years. Time was running out. As Jide and his team infiltrated a Phoenix's stronghold deep in the Niger Delta, he realized that this fight was different. The cartel had been about power and greed, but the Phoenix's Brotherhood was about control and ideology. Defeating them would require more than just exposing corruption. It would require dismantling the entire structure that allowed such organizations to thrive. General Kazeem, a former warlord from Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta, had once fought against foreign exploitation. But over the years, his ideology had twisted. He now saw himself as the rightful ruler of Nigeria's oil industry, believing that only he and his brotherhood could dictate the country's future. Kazeem had gathered disillusioned former cartel members, rogue military factions, and foreign mercenaries who had once operated in war-torn regions of the Middle East. His vision was not just to control oil distribution, but to establish a parallel government in the oil-producing regions, one that could challenge the federal government and the international corporations that had long controlled Nigeria's wealth. With Nigeria's oil industry in turmoil, international intelligence agencies turned their attention to the conflict. The CIA and MI6, seeing Nigeria as a key player in global energy security, discreetly funneled support to President Garba's administration. They trained elite counterterrorism units, provided cyber surveillance tools, and supplied intelligence to Nigerian forces battling the Phoenix's Brotherhood. Meanwhile, Russia and China played a different game. Viewing Nigeria's instability as an opportunity, they quietly funneled resources to the Phoenix's Brotherhood. While they did not openly endorse General Kazeem, they provided arms, drones, and financial backing through proxy groups. Their goal was clear: destabilize the Western-backed Nigerian government and secure direct access to Nigeria's oil reserves without international regulatory oversight. The conflict escalated when the Phoenix's Brotherhood executed its boldest move yet, a coordinated attack on Lagos. The Brotherhood infiltrated key strategic locations, including the ports, oil terminals, and government installations. Explosions rocked the city as their operatives sabotaged fuel depots, causing panic and widespread chaos. President Garba declared a state of emergency, deploying elite military units to combat the insurgents. Jide and his team were at the heart of the response. Their mission was clear: retake Lagos and eliminate General Kazeem's forces before the city fell into complete disarray. As night fell, a fierce urban war broke out. Gunfire echoed through the streets. Explosions lit up the skyline. Jide and his team, alongside government forces, engaged in street-to-street combat, battling well-trained Brotherhood operatives who fought with the ferocity of men who believed they were fighting for a cause greater than themselves. Jide found himself in direct confrontation with Colonel Malik, Kazeem's second-in-command. A brutal hand-to-hand fight ensued on the rooftop of an abandoned government building. Malik, a skilled fighter, nearly overpowered Jide, but with sheer determination, Jide delivered a final blow that sent Malik plummeting to his death. The war in Lagos was won, but the cost was high. Hundreds lay dead, infrastructure was in ruins, and trust in the government was shaken. Jide stood amidst the devastation, reflecting on how far he had come. He had begun as a man who simply wanted to expose the truth, but now, he had become a warrior in a battle that never seemed to end. Amina, documenting the entire ordeal, saw the toll it had taken on Jide. She confronted him, asking, "How much longer can you keep fighting?" But Jide had no answer. He knew that as long as men like General Kazeem existed, the fight would never truly be over. General Kazeem had escaped Lagos, retreating deep into the Niger Delta. His forces were weakened, but far from defeated. With backing from foreign interests, he was already planning his next move: one that would shake the foundations of Nigeria's fragile stability once again. Jide, Amina, and Ibrahim were left with a grim realization: the war against corruption and power-hungry warlords was never ending. It had simply evolved into something even more complex. General Kazim had retreated into the dense swamps of the Niger Delta, fortifying his stronghold with ex-military operatives and mercenaries. Intelligence reports indicated that his forces had regrouped, gathering weapons and supplies for a final offensive. His goal was clear: to establish an autonomous oil state beyond the reach of the Nigerian government. Jide and his team, now embedded within a special task force, were sent deep into the Delta to dismantle the Brotherhood once and for all. The operation, codenamed Shadow Strike, required precision, speed, and absolute secrecy. If they failed, Kazim's forces would regain control of vital oil pipelines, plunging Nigeria into further instability. As they navigated the labyrinth of river channels, Jide's instincts screamed that something was wrong. The Phoenix's Brotherhood was waiting. They had anticipated the offensive. The moment Jide and his men landed on the riverbank, gunfire erupted from concealed positions. It was an ambush. Somebody had leaked their mission details. As the battle raged, Jide's mind raced. Only a handful of people had knowledge of Shadow Strike's movements. Someone within their ranks was working for Kazim. And that someone was Ibrahim Kasima. Ibrahim had been Jide's closest ally, his trusted confidant. But as the firefight reached its peak, Ibrahim disappeared into the jungle, heading straight for Kazim's command center. He had played them all. Ibrahim had been working with the Phoenix's Brotherhood all along. Amina, monitoring from a secure location, picked up intercepted communications confirming Ibrahim's involvement. It was a stunning betrayal. He had been feeding the Brotherhood information for months, ensuring that Kazim always stayed one step ahead. Jide was forced to make an impossible decision: pursue Ibrahim, or finish the mission. He knew that if Kazim wasn't stopped now, Nigeria would never recover. Suppressing his fury, he gave the order: push forward. As the battle in the Delta unfolded, the geopolitical chess game reached its climax. The CIA and MI6 increased their backing of Nigerian government forces, deploying covert operatives to ensure the success of Shadow Strike. Meanwhile, Russian and Chinese intelligence operatives provided logistical support to the Phoenix's Brotherhood, hoping to turn Nigeria into a failed state they could manipulate. In a final act of desperation, General Kazim attempted to broker a direct deal with Russian private military contractors, offering them control over key oil fields in exchange for military assistance. The world watched as Nigeria teetered on the edge of all-out war. Back in Lagos, President Garba faced immense pressure. If the offensive failed, he risked losing international support. The fate of Nigeria's sovereignty now rested in Jide's hands. As Jide and his men breached Kazim's final compound, they found Ibrahim waiting for them. He had positioned himself between Jide and Kazim's escape route. The once brothers now stood on opposite sides of a war that had consumed them both. Ibrahim pleaded his case: "You don't see it, Jide. The government we fought for is just as corrupt as the cartel we destroyed. Kazim is the only one who can change this country." Jide had no words left. He had seen too much, lost too many. With a steady aim, he pulled the trigger. Ibrahim fell, his betrayal costing him everything. In the final moments of the battle, Kazim made one last desperate attempt to flee. A gunfight ensued, ending with Jide personally taking him down. The warlord, once untouchable, lay defeated in the very oil fields he sought to control. The Phoenix's Brotherhood was no more. With Kazim dead and the Brotherhood dismantled, Nigeria entered a fragile era of reconstruction. The Nigerian government regained control of its oil reserves, but corruption still lingered in the shadows. President Garba initiated sweeping reforms, aiming to increase transparency in the oil industry, dismantle lingering cartel networks, and improve security in the Niger Delta. However, not everyone welcomed these changes. Former cartel benefactors, foreign investors, and disgruntled political figures quietly plotted their return to power. Jide had fought the battle, but he found no solace in victory. The weight of everything, the betrayals, the losses, the endless cycle of corruption, pressed on him. He declined offers of a government position and chose instead to disappear, retreating to a remote village in the Eastern Highlands. Amina continued her work, becoming a prominent advocate for press freedom and anti-corruption efforts. She tried to convince Jide to return, but he refused. One evening, she found him sitting by the river, staring into the horizon. "You can't run forever, Jide," she said. "I'm not running," he replied. "I just need to believe that the fight was worth it." Amina knew then that Jide was forever changed. The war had taken something from him that could never be restored. The battle for Nigeria's future was not over. The faces of power would change, but greed, corruption, and ambition would always find new hosts. And sir, when you hear whispers of those who dared to fight the oil cartel, remember Jide Okaforum, Amina Danjuma, and Ibrahim Kasima. They did not fight for recognition. They did not seek glory. They did not seek power. They only sought the truth so that the truth would never be silenced. Their fight did not end with victory, it only evolved. The names may change, the enemies may shift, but the struggle for justice remains eternal. The truth had won many battles, but the war for Nigeria's soul was far from over. And in the darkest corners of the world, the fight for justice will always continue. And in the end, the truth must always win. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment. We appreciate your feedback.